update. Steve?
Good afternoon. Update as of August 6th. Currently, we have 81 active fires in Saskatchewan at this time. We have had 448 so far this year, which is above the 5-year average of 354 wildfires. Fire conditions have slightly improved. We have had scattered rain across the northern part of the province. That rain has not been significant. So we are seeing improved fire behavior, but no significant change in overall outlook. As a result of that, we continue to put resources to these fires for containment, and that includes our out-of-province resources from Quebec, Mexico, Australia, British Columbia, Ontario, and Prince Edward Island. 190 Type 3 local firefighters are assisting, and we still have 300 armed forces personnel here in the province. We're here for 2 weeks, and we have asked and received a 1-week extension for them to remain with us to continue their efforts. So overall, so far this year, very busy. At this point in time, 2.3 million hectares have been impacted by wildfire so far this year. Currently, there are 4 highways impacted for travel. That's Highway 955 north of La Loche, Highway 914 to Pine House, Highway 918 from Beauval to Pachinak, and Highway 916, which travels across the northern part of Prince Albert National Park. At this time, we have about 3,000 individuals displaced on evacuation. So we have 13 active communities under evacuation. 5 of those are for only P1s and P2s health related, and the remaining 8 are on full evacuation status. That does mean that there may be essential services personnel remaining in the community to support those communities while the residents are away. And we have ongoing discussions with those communities leaders on fire behavior, on the pending weather conditions and changes to those fires, access, power, and utilities, and whether there may be opportunities for repatriation. So we have those conversations on an ongoing daily basis with each of those leaderships so that they have the most informed information to make decisions on extending or ending any evacuations they have in place. The number of values impacted this year currently stands at 2,160. That is only 2 additional values in the last 2 weeks. And again, as we discussed earlier, the majority of those losses exist in the Denair Beach area and East Trout Lake area. On the last note is because of the rain, we will look at reassessing the fire ban once we get some magnitude and impact of that rainfall, and also a projection in the next 24 to 48 hours. And then we'll make a decision on either revising, extending, or revoking the fire ban. That's all the summary I have for today, and then we can open up to questions, Stephanie.
Thank you, Steve. Just a reminder, 1 question and 1 follow-up, and please identify your outlet. Aaliyah?
Hi, good morning. Aaliyah Marco from CBC. I just wanted to ask, so La Loche community leaders spoke out about 2 buses of evacuees that were turned around over the weekend, and they say it was by the SPSA. They also said that they were told by the SPSA that the policy around supports have changed and they don't accept smoke anymore to be a reason for evacuation. So I also heard from the SPSA that there was a meeting with community leaders recently. So I was wondering if you could clarify how this miscommunication happened and what's being done to make it right, because there still is confusion in the community.
So we have spoken to the community individuals that received the information. So there was an email that had gone to community leaders talking about smoke evacuations particularly. That led to a discussion on whether buses should or should not be leaving the communities due to smoke. That was clarified and cleared up with those agencies by the Public Safety Agency. Buses returned and evacuated the individuals. There always will be some delays with buses because, again, we don't just have to look at the time the buses leave, but where is their destination, what time they will arrive at that destination, whether folks are going to need food along the way. So when you consider loading people in La Loche and putting them on a bus in the middle of the night to go all the way to Regina, are they getting, they need food support? They'll have to get registered and identified which of the 4 hotels that are on hold, which will they be getting rooms. So there is some planning, a fair bit of planning that takes place. And one of the issues is working with the community on who they want to be evacuated, what direction they're providing to their own residents about the evacuation. So we often get questions about where are we going? How long are we going in to be out? And that may be a question that can only be answered by the community. So there is a fair bit of on-site planning, and we work directly with the local emergency operations center in those communities with our staff to give them what support and information they require.
Thank you, Steve. Aaliyah, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, so I was just wondering, so you said you had conversations around the smoke. So the evacuees were turned around halfway through the evacuation. Was that because you realized they weren't going to have housing when they got to Regina, or what was that conversation?
No, the premise and the concern was of did they need to leave due to a smoke threat, a medical a smoke threat to the community. And part of that's related to when the Ministry of Health assessed some of those, it's not just the air quality, it's what services are available to that local community to provide respite for those folks that could be impacted. So there's a number of variables. And we at the Public Safety Agency don't make the medical decision. So if there's questions that they're leaving because of smoke, and they would wish to support, we will support them and we move them. It is a community-based decision. The confusion came to whether there was indeed a smoke threat and whether that should or should not impact their leaving the community. So that was clarified and rectified. So a couple buses had left, a couple got put on hold, and then those were reassumed and evacuations continued.
Thank you. Chris, you're up next.
Chris Van Brinkel with Global News. So Steve, what is the threshold then for saying that smoke is a threat enough to evacuate? Like, is there an air quality determination? What is the number?
So we do not do that. The health authorities have that information and make that decision and provide that advice directly to the communities. That is not a decision that the Public Safety Agency makes. To address that, the public agency has done a lot of work and provided, for instance, fresh air shelters in most of our northern communities, which means that people could stay. But for instance, if they did not have an air conditioner in their house, they could go to a centralized place where the air is being cleaned with industrial, air cleaners so that they have clean smoke and get some rest. And health guidelines will be provided, including curtailing outdoor activities, avoiding your outdoor time, keeping your doors and windows closed. So other preventative measures that may address the smoke issue without having to do an evacuation. And that does come from the Ministry of Health.
As a follow-up, Steve, can you list off which communities are P1, P2, and which are full evacuations, please?
Sure. Full evacuations are the resort subdivision of Lac La Plonge, the northern hamlet of Jans Bay, La Plonge Reserve, resort subdivision of Little Amiot Lake, resort subdivision of Ramsey Bay, Patchneck English River First Nation, northern village of Pinehouse, and northern village of La Loche, including the Clearwater River Dene Nation. They are not contained. They are any residents. But Isle La Crosse, northern hamlet of Coal Bay, Canoe Lake, Canoe Narrows. Sorry, that's an error. Canoe Lake, Canoe Narrows is a full evacuation. But the northern village of Beauval is P1s and 2s, and we have just returned Montreal Lake, Cree Nation, which was also a P1, P2 community.
Thank you, Steve. Up next, we have Dane.
Thanks for the taking this question, Steve. Dane Patterson with the Globe and Mail. Just a while ago, in the beginning of June, so residents of Wadden Bay stayed behind to fight a wildfire near their home because they felt that they wouldn't get the support from the SPSA. Can I just get a kind of quick response on your thoughts about that? You know, the residents staying behind to fight a wildfire because they feel the SPSA wouldn't provide the support to save their homes.
Well, without a mandatory evacuation, we cannot ask residents to leave. If they believe that they need to stay and support their community, they have the legal right to do so. Wadden Bay is a recognized fire smart community. In the fire situation in 2015, they also stayed and protected their community. They put up sprinklers. They had done extensive work around their communities, removing unwanted fuel. They have a fuel an equipment and fuel cache to run pumps and hoses throughout their community. And they stayed and protected their community in 2015. They chose to do that again. They were successful in 2015 and they were successful again this year. And that comes down to some of the principles we have, is that wildfire protection and wildfire response is a shared responsibility by community leaders, by individuals, to take measures to protect themselves and in some cases be part of the effort to avoid wildfire impacts.
So just to clarify and kind of go on top of that, Steve, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is that they would have been under a mandatory evacuation from June 2nd to June 12th. Before I go to my next question, do you mind just clarifying, is that accurate?
A mandatory evacuation is a recommendation. Only the RCMP could physically remove somebody from their private property, even under a full. So in other words, even L'Orange had a full evacuation. Did not mean that every resident in L'Orange left during that period of time. It is a recommendation by community leadership that people should leave the community.
Okay, so as far as the people that stay behind, then like, does the SPSA find issue with people staying behind, given that it is just a recommendation?
Actually, we don't get to make that decision, but people who are staying behind with recommendations is, you know, they have to consider their own safety. This is not unheard of, as many communities do it, and even globally, many communities in places like Australia have a stay and defend policy that their community leadership has established, or they may have a point and controls where they will leave their community and allow just the province or the territories to provide protection. So it's different for everyone. It depends how support they have internally. It depends on how many measures they've taken. But to be honest, we've seen it in many global situations where you'll see a resident in California standing in his yard with a water hose trying to protect his own property. And they can't be removed by an order. It's a recommendation that for their safety, they should consider leaving the area.
Thank you, Steve. We'll now go to Nicole.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to go back to the Laloche situation on the weekend, because what you described, it sounds like the call for smoke exposure is by the health authorities, but SPSA does a bit of the logistics side. And I'm just curious who made the call to, you know, turn back the buses on the weekend on Sunday and then carry out the full evacuation. Like, who made that call? Because the buses did turn around from what I've heard.
That's correct. So the buses were turned around due to some information about whether there was a smoke criteria. So the Public Safety Agency was the support unit and did turn and hold the buses back and ask people to debark until discussions with community leadership on whether they wish to continue. So they did wish to continue, even though, again, there was no direct fire threat. So as soon as they made their decision, we continued to support them and we evacuated the residents.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have a follow-up, Nicole?
No, that's all for me. Thank you.
Okay, and I see Dane, the question. Oh,
It's not related to the Losh fire, so Chris, if you'd like to go first, go ahead.
No, mine's not Lalash. You go ahead.
Just going back to the what we were talking about, kind of mandatory evacuations, it does seem kind of counterintuitive that they're called mandatory evacuations, but kind of a recommendation as far as the people to leave. Is it just a recommendation because there's no criminality involved? Like as far as if you are to stay behind, the RCMP, as you mentioned, can't forcefully remove you?
Yeah, I mean, it has to do with the threat, the perceived threat that the leadership has for their citizens in that location. So voluntary means if you prefer to be away, take advantage of that, and maybe you go to your home from your cabin, or maybe you go visit your sister while there's smoke in the area. Maybe you have an important event you have to attend and you don't want to be impacted by road closures. Voluntary evacuation may be very suitable. But then we get into situations where we have direct smoke impact, and that primarily impacts people with health conditions, are what we call P1s and 2s. So there may be need to move them from the community if the community cannot support them and their health conditions under the smoke situation they're in. That escalates up to what's called a mandatory evacuation. And a mandatory evacuation does two things. It says they're advising all of their citizens that it is serious enough that they need to leave. They will be supported when they leave, but they should pack up their belongings and leave the community because their risk is at that level. It also does not mean everyone leaves. For instance, there's a consistent list. Most communities will already have them pre-established on who's essential services. So the person who runs the water treatment plant, your fire department, they don't leave, they stay to defend. Maybe the police contingent in town will stay. Some people who run essential services like the only gas station and maybe their only grocery store, so people can still get food and gasoline if they need it. So even a mandatory evacuation does not necessarily include everyone. Many of these locations, our own staff are based there and fighting the fires and are actually staying in these communities fighting the fire, even though there is quote unquote a mandatory evacuation for the entire area. They may send non-essential people like their spouses and children and ask them to leave until things calm down, but not everybody leaves the area under a mandatory evacuation.
thanks, Steve. Now, Chris?
Yeah, Steve, I wanted to ask about accommodations for evacuees. It seems the last number of evacuations in the last couple of weeks, they've been sent to Swift Current, sent to Regina, in the case of Laloche. Why so far? Like, why are we not able to accommodate them in Saskatoon or in Prince Albert, closer to their homes?
Well, we do a consistent canvas of availability of rooms, so it often has to do with the number of expected evacuees. So we'll take an example. If when Moval evacuated, they estimated that they had 600 people that would need to be accommodated. So our choices may be divide them in between 6 or 7 small communities and split them all up and have families broken up, or to put them in a central location that may be able to support all 600 of them, like a situation like Regina. That does change on a day-to-day, and it also depends how many people are evacuating. So in this situation, Prince Albert and Saskatoon were already full of evacuees from previous evacuations. So as this escalated, we will go farther and farther, and we may even have to go outside of the province. That may also be a choice. Meadow Lake Tribal Council evacuated some of their individuals and moved them directly into Alberta. They found accommodations and moved them directly there, and did not ask for them or did not have them located in Saskatchewan. So it's all a dynamic process. It ebbs and flows, and it all, again, really impacted by the number. If we even look back to 2015, we had thousands of people located in Cold Lake and Alberta when we had mass evacuations, large number of evacuees that overwhelmed Saskatchewan. And that's provided that, again, we are putting people typically primarily in hotel situations. It would be different if we were doing mass accommodation, congregate shelter, where we could use arenas. And we're, you're hearing and seeing a little bit of that in Manitoba, where they have big centers that are being held strictly for accommodating large folks. And you saw it in Hurricane Katrina, where they basically used the arena, the football stadium to house evacuees from the hurricane. So that happens, but that's not our first choice. So we'll use hotels, even if it means moving people a little farther.
So in early June, we saw the use of Cosmos Civic Center in Saskatoon, but now we're not using a center like that, and that's because of the preference to use hotels first, even if it means an additional 2.5, 3 hour, 4 hour drive for these evacuees?
That is the preference that communities have identified to us. Part of the issue is that we did not manage all of the evacuations in the spring. Some of those were managed through a third party, through Peter Ballantyne and one of their vendors, and they did use congregate housing and shelter, but we have not done that through the SPSA.
Okay, Dane?
Yeah, it's following up on that, just to kind of clarify, to my understanding, that these folks wouldn't have been considered, essential, such as nurses or firefighters or guests. They were just kind of regular residents hoping to defend their home. Just to kind of preface that, I think there might have been some misunderstanding with the last one as kind of what their role would have been. With that in mind, I did mention earlier that they stayed because they felt the SPSA was under-resourced to save their homes. I am curious, is the SPSA stretched any more thin than it has been in previous years, or what is the resourcing like so far this year with the SPSA in attacking fires? Specifically, this would have been beginning of June, so kind of looking at that time period.
Well, there was a number of communities, Larange, Namibian Lake, Wadden Bay, Sucker River. All of them were getting support from the Public Safety Agency. Because of the size, the committee made a decision is that their support would improve their likelihood of preventing damage to their property and location. So they stayed. Other communities totally evacuated and left, and just the agency stayed behind to protect and defend. So yes, we're resources stretched thin, but we've been talking about that since May. Is lots of fire on the landscape, lots of threats, and that means we can't be everywhere all at once. But that entire P2 fire was being managed, and community threat is number one in our priority, and the community threats were our targets for all our suppression efforts.
I guess in that case, do you have a message or thoughts for people who do feel like they need to stay behind to defend their homes, as Wadden Bay residents, some Wadden Bay residents felt that they needed?
Well, if you're staying, under a mandatory evacuation, it's recognizing that there is a severe threat. Are you prepared to stay? Are you prepared to be able to defend your property? Do you have, for instance, you might have a pump and hose, but what happens when the power goes out and you have no more water pump pressure? If you stay, you got to be prepared to stay. You can't change your mind potentially halfway through when the fire gets a lot closer, because potentially then your drive access and maybe the highway's compromised. Some will say, I'll go out, I'm on the lake, I'll just go out in the boat. Well, how long are you prepared to be in the boat if you can't return to your dock? You're prepared to be in the boat for 24 hours, 36 hours. What's your backup plan? So people need to be prepared. We ask people to have a plan on what you would do in an emergency. And that should be discussed. Are you staying? Are you going? Are you heading north to the nearest community, or are you heading south to your family and friends? What do you take with you? And that includes, are you taking your pets? Are you taking your critical, are Are you contacting fellow folks so they don't go up looking for you? So one of the issues, if you stay, you may run issues as your family and friends are wondering where you are. Are you trapped? Are you safe? You may not have communication. So lots of variables. People have to make their own decision considering, are they prepared to stay? Are they prepared for an emergency? And that's not just a wildfire. That's a snowstorm where the highway's not available. That's a flood when you're beside a lake, or a windstorm. So there are emergency best practices for making an emergency plan for your home and your community. That is a mandate of the Public Safety Agency that every community will have an emergency response plan on record, and practice that plan and figure out what they would do in the event of different types of emergencies occurring, and share that with their community members and make sure everybody's up to speed on what would happen and what should happen.
Thank you, Steve. We're almost at time, so we'll do a final call out for questions. Chris?
Steve, 2.3 million hectares burned so far this year. Is that the worst since 2015?
I would say that it's probably the worst in the southern part of the forest. It is not our largest hectares burnt, but probably the largest in the commercial forest, southern half of the forest, because the fires have been concentrated in that southern half. And as we talked earlier, that's primarily because over half these fires were started by individuals before we had lightning. So huge human caused fire impact, and that occurs in the southern part of the forest where most of these communities and residents are located.
Thank you, Steve. That will wrap up today's media availability. I do want to add apologies for the short notice of today's availability. There was a technical hiccup, but that was fortunately resolved in time. So thanks everyone, and have a safe rest of your day.